Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for the BASE Overview webinar. I'm going to start with just a quick introduction of what BASE is and how we came to be, and then we'll jump into a demo of the software. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll keep an eye on the chat and Q&A panels. So if you do have questions, feel free to raise those at any point during the webinar. I'll also stick around after the webinar to answer any lingering questions that anybody has. So again, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today. BASE is the first ever software created specifically for assistance and the unique workflows and the unique challenges that come with that particular role. There are tons of tools out there for salespeople and marketing people, but until BASE, there was really nothing created specifically for assistance. So I'm super excited to show you what we've created today. Just so that we can all make sure that we're on the same page, there are a couple of things that I like to mention just right off the bat. So like I mentioned, BASE is for assistance. That means that your executive does not need an account. They do not need to learn a new tool. They do not need access to their workspace. This truly is a tool for you. It's meant to provide you with some efficiencies to make your job easier. It's meant to find ways to help you be more proactive and be more valuable. But yes, it's just a tool for you. Another thing that I like to mention early on is that we support multiple types of accounts. So what you'll notice is that when you create your very first workspace, you'll be invited to connect an account. We integrate with both Gmail and Microsoft. From a Microsoft standpoint, we support Microsoft Live, which is their free account. We also support corporate accounts, including Microsoft Exchange and Outlook 365. I mention this primarily because when you select to connect a Microsoft account, you want to make sure that you're selecting the right kind. So if you are in fact going to connect an Exchange account or an Outlook 365 account, you want to make sure that, that you're connecting with the corporate account option. That option is going to then present you with a list of different types of accounts, and you'll be able to choose the correct one, which will make sure that BASE gets the appropriate field needed to authenticate that particular account. From here, I want to just give you a little bit of orientation so you know what you're seeing and where to navigate to find various pieces of information. Across the top of the screen here, you're going to see workspaces. These workspaces are generally speaking indicative of an executive, and there's typically a 1-to-1 ratio between workspace and executive. I do encourage you to associate avatars or images with these workspaces just so it's easy for you to identify which workspace belongs to which executive. I also wanted to mention that you do have the ability to drag and drop these workspaces. So if you wanted to put them in a specific order, whether that's the executive you support the most to least, alphabetical order, whatever you choose, you do have the ability to move these workspaces around. Down the left-hand side of the screen, you will see your different features. So this includes full-fledged features that are available as well as your beta features. You'll notice that we do have one feature in beta right now, which we will talk about, and we hope to introduce a couple of additional beta features this quarter. So stay tuned for that. And then lastly, from an orientation standpoint, up in the upper right-hand corner is where we have all of our different settings. I point this out for a couple of reasons. So BASE does have the ability to connect different accounts, and depending on how your accounts are set up will determine how you connect accounts to BASE. So under user settings on the connected accounts tab, that's where you can actually connect calendars or emails really to BASE. This is important because if you have delegate access to your executive's calendar, you don't necessarily need to connect their account to the BASE account. You'll be able to access their calendar through the delegate access shared with your account. If you don't have delegate access, you can choose this button to add additional, and it'll walk you through connecting your executive's calendar. This is also where you can reset your password, and change your primary email address. Under Workspace Settings on the Calendars tab, that's where you're actually going to tell Base, of all of the accounts that are connected to my Base account, which calendars are specifically meant to be associated with this particular workspace. So again, if you have delegate access to your executive's calendar, your calendar or your email address will provide access to their calendar. But if you don't, you would connect to their account and access their calendar through their account. I also want to mention that on the Digest, Decision Stream, and Communication tabs, these are areas where you can tune your executive's preferences and how you specifically want Base to operate in that workspace as it's related to their particular preferences. What do I mean by that? Where do you want Workspace replies and notifications to go to? What's your executive's default time zone? What level of detail do you want to show up on the digest? And this may vary from executive to executive. So that's why we give you the ability to set these types of preferences within each workspace. From here, we're going to go back out to the home page and talk a little bit about that before jumping into our very first feature. So on the home page, you're going to see a couple of columns. The first column is a resources column, and it's going to provide links to our FAQs, our help articles, as well as our blog. I'll go ahead and call your attention to this now, but it's going to be ever present on every page within Base, but you'll see this little chat bubble, and the chat bubble is a great way to get in touch with our support team. It's a great place to ask questions, to share feedback about our features, report a problem, whatever the case may be. That chat bubble is going to be present, and you're welcome to communicate with us at any time. The middle column here is the calendar column. Right now, Base has read-only access to the calendars connected to Base. What does that mean? Well, it means that I can click into any of these meetings and I can see some details about them. It'll tell me things like, is my executive attending? Who are the attendees of the meeting? If there's a location, it'll tell me that. If there's a description in the calendar event, it'll show me that. It'll tell me attendees, whose calendar it originated from, all of those types of details. But right now it is read only, which means we're not necessarily sending anything to the calendar from Base, at least right now. Stay tuned for more on that. The last column is our activity column, and the activity column is going to give you some insight into how your executive is behaving or how they're interacting with the information that you're sending them from Base. So have they viewed a decision stream? Have they viewed a digest? How many times have they viewed the digest? Have they answered your decision stream questions? All of that information is going to be available pretty much real time in the activity panel. Lastly, on the home screen or the dashboard, you have two different time zones that you can set independently. So this might be your time zone and your executive's time zone. If your company has multiple locations, you might set multiple time zones here just so you can see what time is it at our various offices. Or if you just have colleagues that are in different time zones, you can set them there so that you can see that at a glance. From here, we are going to navigate to our very first feature, which is Digest Builder. And the original use case for Digest Builder was really to create professional looking updates. You might call them daily updates, daily digests, executive summaries. We've heard tons of different terms used for this, but it's really an update that can be shared with an executive asynchronously. Likely it's things that are kind of low-hanging fruit or things that don't necessarily need to be discussed one-on-one, but can be delivered asynchronously to the executive at a time that makes sense, that just brings them up to speed on some key information, really. You'll notice that you do have access to the full history of digests that you've ever sent. And when you're creating digests, you have the option to create from scratch, which gives you really a blank template that you can start from. Anywhere that you see this little hovering plus sign, you have the ability to add any of these pieces to a digest, and you can just kind of add them a la carte. So that's one way that you can create a digest. It's not the way I would suggest creating a digest, simply because I think there's a way that can make your life easier and more efficient. The other way to create a digest is to click New Digest and create from a template. When you create from a template, there are some obvious benefits there. So you have the benefit of the structure being dropped in for you. So there's a huge efficiency benefit or efficiency gain for the assistant. On the executive side, there's also the benefit of it always being in the exact same order. So the executive's eye knows where to look for the particular information that they're looking for, because it always looks the same and it's always in the same place. You'll notice that when you create from a template, there is an inspiration tab, and we typically see the inspiration tab providing just that inspiration. So a lot of times when assistants begin using BASE, they'll come in here, take a look at a few of the inspiration templates, and then create their own templates based on the type of communication, the type of information they want in the communication, and really make it their own. But definitely check out the inspiration tab, because it'll give you some ideas of how you can use digest and the type of information that you'll include in your digest. When you are working in a team account, you also have the ability to share your digest. So if you've created something that you've gotten really good results from and you want to share it with others in your account, you can simply click on the little 3-dot menu and click Make Visible to the Account. Once you've shared something with your account, it will be available on the Shared with Me tab for everybody else in your account. Today, we're going to walk through an example of creating a daily digest, because that's one of our more common use cases. But other use cases for Digest Builder that we commonly see are things like a weekly recap, which recaps kind of the important things that happened this week, where we stand on follow-up items, and a preview of next week's, high priority meetings and just priorities in general. We often see things like travel itineraries, event checklists, meeting summaries. We're starting to see things like goal updates, whether that's monthly or quarterly. And generally speaking, what we see is that the frequency impacts the type of information. So if it's daily, weekly, pretty frequent digest, it tends to be a bit more tactical, whereas a monthly or a quarterly digest is typically a little bit more strategic in nature. Coming back to the example, let's pretend that I'm an assistant and I use BASE. I know that assistants' days rarely go the way they thought. They're very rarely able to work on something for a long period of time without being pulled away. So traditionally, what we see is that assistants come in the morning, they go ahead and create the digest from a template and start to fill in some information. So if I'm creating this for tomorrow, I'm going to put in the date, which is the 8th. I'm going to go ahead and update my title. So that's Thursday, October 8th. In a world where this is actually your template and not a shared template or in a demo workspace, you probably already have your executive's name filled in, but if not, you could certainly do that. And then you can start to come in and fill in other information. I'm going to assume that I haven't started doing any email management. I haven't started working on anything that I need to provide a status update for just yet. So I'm going to leave those sections alone, but I am going to go ahead and pull in tomorrow's calendar information. So I choose tomorrow's date and I click Add Events. You'll notice that I do get the title here for the date because I added the full day's events, and it pulls in everything on the calendars that I have selected here into my digest. It's also important to mention that maybe you have multiple calendars connected to your workspace. Perhaps your executive has a professional calendar and a team calendar and a family calendar. You can attach as many calendars as you want to a workspace, and then you can filter them out with this filter icon. So some of these events that pull in may not require additional context, and that's really what we're planning to do with the Digest Builder. We plan to add additional context, whether that's, where is the meeting located or what is my goal for the meeting. I have the ability to click into each of these events and turn on and off information. I can also augment all of this information. So we can assume that this is a link. And so we could make that a hyperlink. I can change the color of text. I have control over the size of the font. So depending on the type of meeting is probably going to determine what type of information I'm pulling in here. By default, I have mine set up to pull in any information that's already in the description of my meeting, but I may not actually need all of that information. So maybe I'm removing some of the information there. And then I'm also coming in and adding things like, a link to LinkedIn, maybe a company website, perhaps an agenda or a Google Doc from last meeting's notes. I have the ability to add all the information that my executive would need in order for this meeting to be as successful as possible. So traditionally, again, what we're seeing is that assistants are beginning their digest at the beginning of the day, and then as they go throughout their work and they have things to add to it, they're popping back into BASE. Maybe a little bit of time has gone by and I'm now ready to start adding some information to the important emails section. Maybe I use a foldering system with my executives, so I want to let them know there are 4 emails in the draft folder. Please review and send ASAP. This is important, so I'm going to change the color and maybe I'm going to bold the draft folder. Maybe I also want to let them know there are 3 emails in the today folder. And we could say these need a response today. Maybe I don't need that whole thing red, so I could change it to black again. Maybe again I'm bolding this and I'm highlighting this in red to call attention to it. And then lastly, maybe I want to let them know there are 2 emails in the FYI folder. Please review at your convenience. Because this one isn't time sensitive, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Maybe I also have some status updates that I want to communicate here. So perhaps I'm working on annual reviews. So I'm going to add my bullets back. Annual, that's not what I wanted. I want that to be a bullet. There we go. Annual reviews are underway. Maybe I have some sub bullets. All documents have been created and are in employee folders. 360 and self-evals have been sent. Reminders will go out on Monday for those not completed. So maybe that's one status update that I want to share with them. As I go out throughout my day, I'm probably adding more and more information to this digest as it makes sense and as I've completed information. We know this is a type of communication that assistants are often sending to their executive. Another thing that we know assistants do on a pretty regular basis is have questions. We know that often an executive is hiring an assistant because they're looking for somebody to help them be proactive or to act as a second brain. And so many assistants truly are superheroes. You're mind readers. You can really anticipate your executive's needs. You can anticipate their responses to the questions that you have. And oftentimes you just need them to greenlight something. I always joke that executives suffer from what I call decision fatigue, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but in a lot of ways it's true. Executives are busy. They're constantly having to make decisions about their company, their clients, their staff, their goals. And it can become daunting to answer questions about their own preferences or how they want to handle things. And in a lot of ways, executives hire assistants to kind of help with that workflow. But until BASE, there wasn't really a great way for assistants to ask a question and lay some potential options out in front of the executive. but Decision Stream is here to solve that question. So let's say that we have a couple of questions that we want to add. So again, we're kind of anticipating that assistants are kind of bopping in and out of Digest Builder. You're bopping in and out of Decision Stream as you have questions. But let's go ahead and ask one question. So maybe our question is, what price range do you anticipate for employee holiday gifts this year? So you can ask your question. We recently added this description box, which you can use or not use. But maybe I say, here is a list of the last 3 years of employee gifts. And then I'm going to add a bulleted list. So maybe in 2019, we did Patagonia fleece jackets, which were $115 each. Maybe in 2018, we did a wine set with 2 bottles of wine in branded glasses, and maybe that was $75. Maybe in 2017, we gave everybody an Amazon gift card valued at $100. From here, we can choose our response type, and that's likely going to be based on the type of answer that you plan to put in front of your executive and how you anticipate them responding. So in this scenario, I want to be able to give them several price ranges, but I only want them to be able to select one price range. So in this scenario, I'm going to choose single select, and then I'm going to start putting my price options in here. So perhaps the first level is 50 to 75. Maybe the next one is 75 to 100. Maybe the next one is 100 to 150. I can add as many responses as I want. These responses can act as links. So if you were asking which hotel do you want to stay at when you go to New York, or what restaurant do you want to take investors to after the board meeting, you could actually link out to a website if you wanted. You can also add resources. So if I wanted, maybe I've done some research of various gifts that could fall into each of these price ranges, and I want to attach that so the executive has an idea of what we could do within those price ranges. I can attach spreadsheets and PDFs and Word docs, whatever the case may be. You do have the ability to attach resources that will aid in the decision-making process. I have a priority flag. So I can say this is high priority, medium priority, low priority, or I can turn off the priority altogether. I can also add tags. So if I know that I want to include this on my digest for tomorrow, I could tag it with tomorrow's date. And from here, I just click save. I'm going to ask a second question. And in this question, I'm going to say, I'm starting to schedule annual reviews. Do you want to keep or remove one-on-ones the week of reviews? In this scenario, I'm going to choose single select, and I'm going to choose my response options are going to be keep or remove. If I had phrased this question differently, so maybe I said, do you want to remove one-on-ones the week of reviews? Maybe I would choose yes, no, other for that particular response as the particular response type. So again, your response type is going to be related to how you phrase the question and how you anticipate your executive answering the question. And again, I'm going to save. So we can imagine that throughout the day, I'm adding additional questions to my decision stream. I'm making updates to Digest Builder. And towards the end of the day, I want to go ahead and start putting these pieces together. So I've got all my questions in draft, and all I have to do is select my questions in the order that I want them to appear to my executive. You'll notice that numbers are assigned, so I can send through draft questions. If I need to tweak any of these, I can click into them and make some edits before sending. I also can kind of commingle draft questions and those in my awaiting response column. You'll notice that this question and awaiting response has a badge that indicates to me that my executive explicitly skipped the question. This means they viewed the question or the decision stream and they've chosen to not answer it at that particular time. I can let it hang out here, see if they answer it later, or I can send it back through in this stream if I want to. I'm going to give them a little bit more time and just send these 2 questions through. You'll notice that the share button is kind of pulsing to bring your attention to it, but when I'm ready to share, I just click share. From here, I can name my stream, so maybe I'm naming it tomorrow's date, digest questions, and then I have multiple ways that I can share this, this decision stream. You'll notice over on the right-hand side, I do have a static preview to see what this is going to look like for my executive that I can click through if I want to. And when it comes to delivering, I have the option to text and I can Slack it. You'll notice with text and Slack, I do have the option to send now or schedule for later. So maybe in another scenario, these aren't questions that I want to add to my digest builder, but instead they're questions that are more time sensitive in nature and I want to send them one off via text. I could certainly do that. And it's always going to come from a dedicated number. It's the same phone number every time. So I always encourage people to add that number to their executives' contacts so that they know it's, you know, it's base or it's you. The other thing I like to mention is there are other use cases for decision stream outside of just that general question and answer process that might lend themselves well to texting or Slacking a decision stream. So one thing I've heard a lot of people do is kind of an end of day wrap up where they're saying, you know, how did your meetings go today? What do these meetings need follow up? Here are all the things that you set out to accomplish today. What can we check off the list? So that might be sent via text or Slack. I've also seen people use Decision Stream as a reminder mechanism. And again, you might schedule that to send at a particular time to say, hey, don't forget you're meeting a client for lunch in 45 minutes. You need to leave the office in the next 5 minutes to make sure you make it there on time. So just a couple of other ways that you could use Digest Builder. I'm sorry, Decision Stream. In this scenario, I'm going to add it to the digest. And I always encourage assistants to do this. If a digest is done really well, the executive is expecting it. They've come to rely on it in a lot of ways to get those asynchronous updates from you, to know what you're working on, what you've pushed forward since yesterday, and also to help them prepare to have successful meetings either tomorrow or today, depending on when that's sent. So what better time than when you have a captive audience to get your own questions answered? So from this share screen, I'm going to navigate over to Digest Builder. It's going to pull up the digest that I've been working on, or the most recent digest that I had open. As a reminder, I do have access to the full history of digests if I needed to put this decision stream on a different digest than the one that I have been working on. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Decision Stream link. It grabs this stream. I can see that it's the stream I created today. It has 2 questions and it gives me a preview of what those questions are. I'm going to go ahead and select that stream. We can pretend that I'm reviewing all of this information one last time before I send it. And when I'm ready, I click Preview and Send. Again, Base is going to give you a static preview of what this looks like for your executive, regardless of how they're viewing it. And now is another great time to remind you that your executive does not need access to Base. All they need in order to view this is a device, whether that's a laptop or desktop. This is also mobile responsive, so if they're viewing it on their mobile phone or their iPad, it's going to look just as nice. And so in addition to the device, they need either internet or mobile access. So regardless of whether they're viewing it on their desktop with internet when they get in for the day, or they're taking their dog on an early morning walk and they're viewing it on their mobile device while they walk, they're going to have a really seamless experience with their digest. Similar to Decision Stream, you have multiple ways that you can deliver this information. So you can deliver it via email, you can control the subject line as well as the recipients. So maybe this isn't a daily digest, but instead it's a meeting recap where you're sharing out all of the meeting notes and action items with people who attended a meeting. You could send it to as many people as you wanted. Again, you have the option to send now or schedule for later. Perhaps my executive is an early riser and I want to schedule it for tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I can just type into this box and choose what time I want it sent. If I don't typically communicate with my executive via email, no problem. We want to give you the opportunity to meet your executive in the way that you're already communicating with them. We don't want the addition of BASE to cause changes for your executive that aren't welcome. So if you tend to communicate with your executive via text, you again have that text option. You can schedule for later or send now. If you communicate via Slack, you have the ability to send the digest to a channel or a direct message. Again, you have send now or schedule for later. If you're using some other form of communication, you have the ability to simply grab the link and paste it anywhere you want, which is what I'm going to do today to show you what the experience looks like. So again, you can see that I have a really nice professional looking digest that didn't take me that long to create because I have a template. And my executive can really leave this open all day so that they have reference to all the meetings and information they need to take those meetings throughout the day. I didn't include these in this example, but we do have a hyperlink here, but you can also add attachments. So if I needed to attach a budget spreadsheet or a PDF of some kind, I can embed images here. So if I wanted to brand it for my company, or I simply wanted to include some images in here as it's related to my executive's day, I could do that as well. You'll notice I also have a decision stream link. So my executive, as they're reviewing their digest, they can answer my questions. It's going to show me their progress to answer. So they've answered 0 of 2 questions. They can read through the question, they can see some context, and then they can choose their option. Maybe here they say, let's try something like loop and tie this year that allows employees to choose a gift within a price range. Let me know what you think. So for each question, your executive will have this additional context box, which will allow them to kind of bidirectionally communicate information back to you. Then they can click continue. Here again, they can see they've answered 1 of 2 questions. They're starting, so then they can read the question and then they can say, here, remove, let's keep Susan's one-on-one because we are working on an important project and I don't want to lose momentum. They click finish and they're done. So what happens for you? Well, within BASE, you're going to see on the home page that the digest has been viewed. They've also answered your questions. From the decision stream screen, the questions will go from the awaiting response column to the answered column. And in a few minutes, you'll also receive an email that will indicate to you that your executive has answered your questions, which is especially helpful if you're not actively working in BASE at that particular moment. So then what happens next? Well, we've worked with enough assistants to know that often when you ask a question and you get a response, it becomes something you have to do. You may have noticed earlier that one of our new features is our task feature. It's in beta currently. So what we will allow you to do is select your questions and click create tasks. From there, it's going to push those tasks over to your task list. Something else that you can do if you don't want to select multiple at a time, you can actually click on the little ellipse and click create task to push it over to your task list. From here, you can then go into the task and make some changes. So here we want to, maybe we change the subject or the task name to employee holiday gifts. I can change the due date. So perhaps I want to get this done by the end of the month. I can tag it. So maybe if I want to tag it holiday, I can also add subtasks. So maybe my first subtask is to research gift options like loop and tie. Maybe I then want to present the options to Sarah and then order / schedule gifts. I can also associate individual due dates for my subtasks. So maybe I want to have the research done by Monday because I know that I have a one-on-one with Sarah on Wednesday where I can present those options to her. And then I want to make sure that I have them ordered or scheduled by the 28th ahead of my October 30th deadline to have this whole project done. You'll notice here that I can add a new question, which will push a question from the task over to decision stream while also kind of coupling those two. If I've asked other questions related to this particular task, I can always pull in questions from existing questions. I can also add attachments. So maybe when I do my research, I want to attach that file here so that I have everything put together as it's related to this particular task. I can also manually create tasks, which you get a very similar screen. Back from the task list, I'm gonna actually complete that one since it is untitled. So I have open tasks and completed tasks. If I've accidentally completed something that I shouldn't have, I can come in here and unmark the checkbox, which will push it back over to open tasks. I also have a couple of smart folders. So I have tasks that are due today, tasks that are due this week, and upcoming tasks, which are going to be tasks that are due within the next 30 days. If I go back to open tasks, I can click on these various tags and they will act as smart filters for me. I can always clear the filter and come into the filter to select specific tags and due date ranges if I'd like. So that whole workflow is kind of an example of how the different features within BASE can obviously act independently of each other, but are also very much connected. Before we move on to our last feature, I want to come back into Digest Builder just to talk about a couple of other things that we're working on that are related to both tasks and Digest Builder. So right now you'll notice that tasks do have that beta flag, which indicates we're not done. And truthfully, we're not done with the other features that aren't in beta, but we're actively working on this one. We're going to add things like the ability to assign owners. You have the ability within a team account to share workspaces. So in a scenario where multiple assistants are collaborating on support, we want to make sure it's very clear in who owns which task. So stay tuned for different things that we're going to be adding to our task manager. We're also going to be adding a feature we're loosely calling inbox right now. And inbox is going to allow you to push things from other places that are needed with support. So perhaps you're pushing a message from Slack that is a task and you need to push it from inbox to tasks. Perhaps you're forwarding an email because you want to attach that email to a digest because it's related to something you need from your executive. So we're going to be adding that inbox feature. We're also going to be changing Digest Builder a bit. So Digest Builder is an incredibly helpful tool in the version that exists today, but we're going to be pushing the envelope a little bit on Digest Builder. We're tentatively calling that feature Dynamic Digest, but it's going to allow for a more interactive experience with your executive. We're going to allow things like commenting, so your executive will be able to view the digest and make comments. You'll be able to have comment threads back and forth that are attached to that particular digest. We're going to allow you to embed your decision stream questions in that digest so they don't have to leave the digest to view and answer your questions. We're going to introduce collapsible sections. So perhaps you want to provide additional, maybe superfluous information about something on the digest, but you don't necessarily want it to take up a ton of real estate. You'll be able to add it into a collapsible section. So if your executive wants to expand it to get more information, they can. But if not, it's not taking up a ton of space on the digest. And then another thing we want to do is we know that sometimes assistants are actually managing tasks for their executive. So you'll be able to pull over tasks that your executive actually has to complete to the digest. They'll be able to mark them completed, and it'll mark it off of your task list as well. So those are some things that we are planning with some other features that we're working on. The last feature that I want to mention today is dossier. And dossier is really just a great place to keep all of your executives' preferences. I know when I was an assistant, I often kept this information. Some of it was in Trello, and some was in Google Docs, and some of it was on sticky notes on my monitor, and some of it was in a notebook. I never really worried about being able to find something, but I often thought about how much time I wasted looking for things because I had information in so many different places. And dossier really aims to solve that because it allows you to keep all of their preferences in one place. Not only that, it allows you to keep multiple executives' preferences within one platform, but segregated from each other. Dossier is an incredibly helpful tool in a lot of different scenarios. I'll mention a couple of them here. So let's say you're just getting to know an executive, you're starting a relationship with that executive. Dossier in a lot of ways can act as kind of a getting to know you agenda or an expectations setting agenda where you can actually walk through dossier and fill out information as you're having the conversation. It's really helpful in a transition scenario. So let's say you get a promotion and somebody is coming in to backfill you. You have everything related to that executive in this nice little package called a workspace that you can just hand over to the assistant that's backfilling you. Another scenario where it's really helpful is, let's say you're going out on vacation. You're able to allow somebody to have access to that for a definitive period of time while you're out of the office and then revoke that access. But during that time, they have everything that they need to support your executive. So we'll walk through, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll walk through quickly kind of the types of information that you can keep here. So on your executive profile, you have contact information and biographical information. It's also where you can associate their avatar. You can connect websites. So if your executive has a personal website, maybe a Twitter account, their LinkedIn, whatever the case may be, you can connect websites here. You can attach images like a headshot. You can add attachments, maybe their bio if you're often sending that. You can define their notification preferences and the types of digests they like to receive. You can include details like when they typically receive that, how frequently, what information is included. If you're also leveraging templates, this would be a great place to say, here's the template title. Under scheduling, we let you define your executive's office hours. They may be the same every day, but they may not be. Their upcoming out of office dates, so you have all of that at a glance. Any meeting preferences that they have around things like how long their meetings should be, what type of break they like in between those meetings, how many unscheduled hours do they like a day. If you're using naming conventions, those can be defined here, as well as the meaning of different colors on the calendar. In a world where we're traveling again, you can include your executive's travel bio. You'll notice that all of these fields have quick copy buttons. So if you need to quickly copy the passport number to your clipboard and paste it somewhere else, that's easy to do. Preferences around air travel, what airports they prefer and airports they do not like to use. And then for airlines, hotels, and car rentals, you have the various vendors or airlines in this case, as well as the frequent flyer number. So I can quickly copy this number, click on Delta, it opens up Delta's website. I'm able to search for the trip. I have my frequent flyer number copied to my clipboard, so I can just paste it whenever I need it and go ahead and book that flight for my executive. Hotels work in primarily the same way, but I always like to mention to people that these can be as broad or as specific as you want them to be. So if I just want to include the hotel chain, I can do that, or I can include specific hotels that my executive likes when he or she travels to a specific city. Contacts is another thing that we include in dossier, and this is not meant to be a replacement for your executive CRM, but instead it's meant to be a place where you as the assistant can keep information often nuanced about the key relationships in your executive's life. So this might be spouse and children if you're ever booking personal travel. It might be doctors. It might just be colleagues and friends or networking contacts. But dossier allows you to, again, track some biographical information, contact information, and then you can also have a notes section where you can track all types of information that you then surface up proactively to your executive when it makes sense. Again, you have the ability to add attachments and images as well. Here, we have a software section that allows you to define what software applications your executive uses for various purposes. And then lastly, we have a custom section. In the custom section, I would keep things like coffee orders, when they say, like, various places they like to get lunch and what their order is from that place, information about, again, about doctor's offices, the kids' school, the dog's vet, where they get their car maintained, when was the last maintenance, when do they need to have their oil changed, that type of information. But I also would keep a list or an entry for each city they often flew to so that I could reference back. You know, they always like to fly Delta when they fly into Chicago. Here are the hotels they prefer to stay at. Here are the types of restaurants they like to eat at. So next time my executive is going to Chicago, I can say, hey, here are the key contacts we typically meet with when we go to Chicago. Would you like me to reach out to them, any of them, and maybe schedule a casual lunch at Crosby's or a happy hour at Punch Bowl Social? So again, it just allows me to track all that information that I may or may not need again in the future, but I have there so that I can surface it back up to my executive when it makes the most sense. So you've gotten to see kind of how each of these features work in a silo, but how they also work together. And that's going to be a common theme for BASE moving forward, is how can we take workflows in the assistant's life, streamline them, make them more efficient and more effective, and also help these pieces interact with each other. I've alluded to a couple of different features that we're working on, but you'll also notice over the coming months that we go deeper with some of our existing features. The only feature I haven't mentioned that we're working on is we're loosely calling Advanced Scheduler right now, but it's going to help you with scheduling, but also keeping track of various things related to your executive's calendar. So definitely keep an eye out for more information about that. That's really all I wanted to share with you guys today. I will hang out after the webinar for any questions that you may have for me. So feel free to use that chat panel or the Q&A panel. Like I said, I'll hang out to answer your questions. I've also been recording this webinar, so I will share that out with all attendees either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So thank you again for joining me today. I hope you've learned a lot about BASE. I hope you're so excited to get started. And if there's anything I can do, questions I can answer, ways that I can support you, please don't hesitate to reach out.